Everyone, how y'all doing? Welcome, welcome. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the dietary laws, eating food sacrificed to idols, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the crutches and scriptures that our people use when it comes to trying to bob and weave around why they shouldn't obey certain laws in the Old Testament anymore. So if y'all know anything about that, go ahead and stick around. If this is not something that you're interested in, you can always feel free to leave. Maybe next time we'll talk about something that'll interest you, or maybe not. But let's get into this. Our first reading is going to come from Revelations 2, verses 14 and 20 to 21. And the first one comes from letter to the church in Pergamos, where we have Yahushua addressing the angel of these churches, and he tells them what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong, and he admonishes them as to why there's a need to change what they're doing and change their ways. The first church, the church of Pergamos, he speaks to them in terms of they are using the doctrine of Balaam. Balaam taught Balak how to cast the stumbling block before the children of Israel. And Most High treasures his children of Israel. He really does. Even if he admonishes them or they have to go through the punishments because of their disobedience, he still loves them dearly. So when Balaam, the diviner, he practices divination and sorcery and kind of like a prophet, but not of Israel. So he understood that the Most High would bless Israel. And if he blessed Israel, then when Balak asked him to put a curse on Israel because of his fear, and Balak was the king of Moab, and he had heard about Israel defeating the Amorites, he got scared that Israel was going to come and try to come for his position. So, being the type of king that he is, he tried to be proactive and go call on Balaam to put a curse on God's people. However, Balaam knew because they would be blessed by the Most High, he couldn't curse them. And remember, we talked about this earlier, that when they followed his laws and commandments and they stayed under his presence, under his protection by the covenant that is with him, because he is their God and they are his people, nobody could touch you. So here is an example of how this diviner knew that the Most High would bless his people, and once he blessed them, then he can't touch them. So he basically would go back and forth. He understood what was going on. He didn't want to do it, but eventually he gave in and compromised for money. He sold out. And he told Balak that if Israel would sin and disobey the law, then the Most High, then they wouldn't have the covering of the Most High or his protection or his blessing, and then he can curse them. And he would tell them that, bring these strange women, these foreign women, the Moabites and the Midianites, or the Midianites, in so the men can, fornicate with them, bring in the heathen and pagan ritualistic things, and, invite them to participate in these things so they can lose their blessing. And that was his doctrine. So he could put a stumbling block in front of the children of Israel, and it would begin in that back and forth once again, where they disobeyed Yah, and his covering would move from them, and then the curses would come upon them because they were sending their sorcerers. Like, even in this day, in our present condition, that's what they do to keep you bound. But you don't realize it because we live in a time where we have people who revel in their disobedience. They revel in the rebellion. They don't understand. They're so selfish. Like, when the Most High used Moses to help to get the Israelites out of Egypt, it came a time that even they were afraid to move. They were afraid to leave. They were willing to stay in their captivity because they were too scared. Don't mind the fact that the Most High just literally floored your opponents, your captors, put plagues upon them, killed their firstborn, got them in such a way that they're like, man, we don't want to touch these people no more. Okay, we don't want to play with these people. Their God is not playing. They literally lifted up off of them and said, go, just go. Leave us alone. And the Most High put an evil spirit on Pharaoh, to cause them to want to move some more, because most of them didn't want to go. They were feeling some type of way, like they felt like, oh, they started to get scared that Moses didn't know what he was doing, Moses and Aaron, and they would get them killed, or they were scared that God would kill them, even though he just released them out of captivity. So we it's been through generations and generations. We have like the same type of people with the same type of low mindset. They don't try to know Yah. They don't try to get to know him. Just like in Isaiah 1 verse 3, it says, the ox knoweth his owner, and the ass his master's crib. But Israel does not know, my people does not consider. They have no intelligence. They don't try to get to know the Most High's character. They jump into all kinds of accusations. If they don't understand him, they don't seek his spirit so they can get a better understanding of him before they jump to conclusions, and then go out and doom themselves by participating in the ways of the heathens. And as you can see in the Old Testament, Israel continued in their sin. They continued to go back and forth, and it was like they didn't quite, no matter how much they kept getting back into their old ways and returning like a dog to their vomit, back to their old ways, it was like it just wasn't sticking. They didn't get it. Okay, Most High could have left them up to their own devices for a long time, but he kept on coming back for them until he realized, my people, they're foolish people. They're stiff-necked. They don't want to get right. The only way that they're going to actually learn who their Messiah is, or for me to actually have a remnant that wants to know me, that gets to know me, is they have to go through the fire. Can't keep saving them. So if they want to be like the heathens, they want to act like the heathens, they want to take up the way of the heathens, even though you said, do not go the way of the heathens, then we'll let them go ahead and experience what he had been trying to protect us from for the longest time. So he scattered Judah, scattered Israel amongst the Gentiles, amongst those heathens. Not even the heathens want to associate with you because they're already jealous. They know that Deuteronomy 14, it talks about, God said, Israel, you're a holy people, you're a set apart people. He put Israel above all nations. Of course, they were already jealous. Look at even when it comes to the dietary laws. The foods that he told you are abominable, he said, if anything dieth of its own cause, you're not supposed to eat it. Give it to the strangers. Sell it to the aliens. Basically, give it to the heathens. He had no regard for them. He had no regard for them the way he regarded Israel, because they were set apart. They were for him, his people, holy. You know how the Bible said, do not give what's holy to dogs? So Israel, no matter how much he put them on that level where it was like, y'all are the judges of the earth, he gave you everything that was good, they kept going back down low. And not like humbling themselves in a low way. They kept going to these false gods and angering the Most High. The commandment, he says he's a jealous God. Do not worship any other God but him. Do not have any other gods but him. But Israel kept bringing it in his face, going to these false gods, practicing paganistic things, going into sorcery, burning incense to false gods, eating food sacrificed to idols, even though he had set you apart. Even when it comes to the dietary laws let's go to Deuteronomy 14, where he says that ye are the children of the Lord your God. Ye shall not cut yourselves, nor make any baldness between your eyes for the dead. For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God, and the Lord hath chosen thee to be a peculiar people unto himself above all the nations that are upon the earth. Not some of the nations, all the nations. He said, thou shalt not eat any abominable thing. These are the beasts which ye shall eat: the ox, the sheep, and the goat, the hart, and the roebuck, and the fallow deer, and the wild goat, and the pegar, and the wild ox, and the chamois, or the chamois, I don't know how you pronounce it, Chamois, and every beast that parteth the hoof, and cleaveth the cleft into two claws, and cheweth the cud among the beasts that ye shall eat. Nevertheless, these ye shall not eat of them that chew the cud, or of them that divide the cloven hoof, as the camel, and the hare, and the coney, for they chew the cud, but divide not the hoof. Therefore they are unclean unto you. And the swine, because it divided the hoof, yet cheweth not the cud, it is unclean unto you. Ye shall not eat of their flesh, nor touch their dead carcass. These ye shall eat of all that are in the waters. All that have fins and scales shall ye eat. So it's fins and scales, not either or, it's both. And whatsoever hath not fins and scales, you may not eat. It is unclean unto you. Of all clean birds ye shall eat, but these are they of which ye shall not eat: the eagle, and the ostrich, and the osprey, and the glide, and the kite, and the vulture after his kind, and every raven after his kind, and the owl, and the night hawk, and the cuckoo, and the hawk after his kind, the little owl, and the great owl, and the swan, and the pelican, and the gyre or gyre eagle, and the cormorant, and the stork, and the heron after her kind, and the lapwing, and the bat, and every creeping thing that flieth is unclean unto you. They shall not be eaten. But of all clean fowls ye may eat. Ye shall not eat of anything that dieth of itself. Thou shalt give it unto the stranger that is in thy gates, that he may eat it, or thou mayest sell it unto an alien, for thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God. Thou shalt not seethe a kid in his mother's milk. And for those who want to know what that is, what does it mean? Thou shalt not seethe, seethe, a kid in his mother's milk. It is a practice that the heathens, the strangers, those other nations practiced, where they would boil the kid of a goat in its mother's milk, and it was part of typical heathenistic practice because they believed in magic and sorcery and things like that. So it was a part of their ways that were to their gods. And if you understand the heathen, you know that the heathen's gods are not your God. It's two different people. There's heathens and the Israelites, two totally different types. The things that they do are not things that you should be doing. So that's why the Most High says you are a set apart people. You are a peculiar people. He gave you the laws of things that you should eat so that no abominations may come upon you because you are holy. Okay? You have been placed above all the nations. That's what Deuteronomy says. Thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God. He didn't consider the strangers or the aliens the way he did you. That's why he said, give it to them. So, all of you who are out there who think, I can just continue to eat the things that these other nations eat because you want to act like you're going to live in ignorance, like you don't know who the heathens are, then that's a setup for you, because the heathens didn't die out. They're still here. They just repackaged themselves, like a marketing technique. They rebranded themselves, remarketed themselves, repackaged themselves, called themselves new names, but their old ways are still very much a part of them. If you read the scripture, you'll see, follow the commandments. The things that the commandments tell you that you should not do, Israel, are the things that they do, because their ways are not your ways. He already said, do not go the way of the heathen. They're dismayed by the signs and wonders in the heavens. But you shouldn't be. When you look up your salvation, you look up for your salvation, and they're going to be worried because your salvation is going to be their downfall. So you're not the same type of people. And a lot of us like to go about like, well, scripture says that you're not supposed to judge what other people eat. They say pray over it, sanctify. I used to use that all the time because I wanted to eat what I wanted to eat. Like Colossians 2 verse 16 says, let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink or in respect of an holiday, or should I say of an holy day, or of the new moon, or of the Sabbath days. Now, when it comes to the dietary laws versus meat, the scripture tells you of the things that you should eat, because when meat is the food that is for your body, right? Because you have meat and you have the flesh, right? You can't eat every flesh, because as human beings we have flesh, but you can't eat meat. I mean, you can, but you shouldn't. Not every flesh is supposed to be meat. Okay? The meat that the Most High put aside for you to eat, which are not abominable, those are the meats that you should be eating. So there comes a time when, you know how people, they start to get into the vegetarian life or the vegan life, and it's mainly like when it comes to those things. You don't judge if you're gonna want to eat meat or you're not gonna eat meat. That's the part. But the meat that you eat is the meat according to the dietary laws. You think you can eat what the heathens eat, but if you read with understanding, it gave those things that you shouldn't eat to the strangers. So a lot of us over there trying to eat what they eat. You're over there eating lobster. Lobster is considered the vulture of the sea, so it eats dead things, dead and decayed things. The shrimp, the prawns, or whatever of their kind, also considered roaches. You're not gonna want to eat roaches. Well, even though the heathens have it as delicacies, those are not things that should touch your mouth. It shouldn't get into your body. Like when it comes to oysters, clams, mollusks, things like that, those are considered the filters of the ocean or the lakes or whatever aquatic body they're in. They're filtering the bacteria, the disease, the bad stuff that come in the water. Especially now with what's going on. Definitely not a good time to be eating all that stuff. But when it comes to meat, there's meat you should eat, and then there's flesh that you shouldn't. These things, they have the flesh, but it's not considered meat for you, the holy people, to be eating. What the heathens do and what you do shouldn't be the same thing. Like, The heathen shouldn't teach. Yes, people, you all were considered the judges. Unfortunately, due to the disobedience, you fell from grace. And yes, the heathens will come around and they'll be like, Paul was the preacher to the Gentiles, but they chose not to retain his knowledge. They chose to instead take the word, divide it up, and cause confusion. Well, that's a whole nother teaching for another time. But we're talking about these dietary laws and people who like to say, well, pray over it. Look, no one's perfect. There was a time when I love lobster. I ate lobster. I ate shrimp whenever I had the opportunity to do crab, all kinds of stuff. The seafood boils, um, pork chops. But knowledge is power and ignorance is not bliss. When Israel was brought into captivity by the strangers with a strange language, they did everything. Everything that they did for you was to keep you in your captivity, from changing your language to feeding you cursed foods, these abominable foods. What do you think when you see soul food? You see people eating chitlin, pig intestines. The scripture here says swine, but just like even the heathens repackaging themselves, they try to repackage a lot of other things and change the name and the structure of things in an effort to cause chaos. But the swine is still the pig, the hog, whatever you call it, and it's considered unclean. It's an abomination. It's not something to eat. The swine eats everything, even dead carcasses. And it causes, what is that called, trichomoniasis, where you have the worms and the maggots sticking into its stomach. It should not be eaten into its flesh. They had you eating ham hocks, which is the pig thigh. They, and sometimes in some cultures they have pig foot. They literally broke down the whole pig. There's a time when even at Christmas it was like tradition for us to have what they call like a glazed ham. So for the longest time, we were living in ignorance. So it's not like, oh, I'm trying to be better than you. The truth is the truth. Not every flesh should be meat for you to eat. The meat that is given here, that's meat. That's food. The other things are not food for you. What the heathens are eating, and that's why you have so many fast foods, and also leading for you to eat food sacrificed to idols. You walking up into a lot of these restaurants, and if you're not vigilant and aware or look around, sometimes you see these other nations restaurants. You go up in them and they got their little idols either in the corner somewhere or in the back, wherever they have, burning incense to their gods, because their gods are not your God. If you study other cultures and other religions, you'll see that they don't believe the same things that you do. They got all these other beliefs, but yet you're going there and you're eating their food. Just like they sacrifice, they talk about the weaves, they talk about the meats, the industries, they're sacrificing their things to their gods. And that is an abomination to our God. So when you argue and you're like, I'm going to eat what I want to eat, I'm going to do what I want to do. I think it was the Seventh-day Adventist Church that had a list. Might be wrong, but I think it was them, because there's some things I respect about them. Like, as I think I mentioned, I've been to almost every church, and now I don't have one, but I have been to almost every denomination. And some of them, you pick from here and you pick from there in learning. And they had like a list or a rundown of all these like unclean foods and the diseases they were connected to. Like oysters, I think oysters was connected to cirrhosis of the liver, and some would be connected to Alzheimer's and diabetes, like shrimp, I think, and lobster. But Don't quote me on that. I have to look it up again. But there was a time that I actually like had to memorize all this stuff. But yeah, it shows you are a set apart people, that you are in the world but you're not of the world. But the churches set you up in that they weren't teaching these things, where they entertain these doctrines of devils, where they would be teaching more about worshiping Mammon. They would teach you things that were more of the heathen faith and their cultures and their traditions and their ways, bringing that into the church and desecrating the temple of God. Now these became the temples of the heathens, or their buildings. And they talk about Jezebel, that the church of Thyatira, they were suffering to have that woman Jezebel teach and seduce the servants of the Most High, teaching them and causing them to fornicate, and also eat the food sacrificed to idols, because they're not teaching the things that they should be teaching. They're teaching the wrong things, or they got a payout, or blinded by these spirits into preaching false knowledge. There was a family relative of mine that I'd been praying for a while, and I had been talking to the family member about just stuff, and they floored me because they were like telling me scriptures and explaining things like they really were getting it. For the longest time, you have these family members you try to talk to, and there are people like, I'm just not getting through to them. It's like talking to a brick wall, like they're in a trance. Like you're Noah. Nobody's listening. You're saying the flood is coming, the flood is coming. And they're like, you crazy. Narcissistic family members, these reprobates around you, they want to make you look like you're the one with the problem until the day comes, and then they trying to get up in the ark, but it's too late. They get shut out. So you're thinking, I'm like, wow, she might be waking up. And then we start to talk about these prosperity preachers. Suddenly, she starts to mention that, she tell me some things that I myself didn't even know. And then she says, but she's going to continue to listen because they motivate her. They motivate her and inspire her. So I was like, I thought we were like 4 steps ahead. We just like backed up 10 steps. So you are motivated. That's what happens. Sometimes there's some people who it's going to take a lot more to get through to them. Sometimes I wonder, the Most High let go of the reprobates. He said he let them go because they would not retain the knowledge of God. So they could go ahead and do what was not convenient. So they would continue into doing their witchcraft and their wickedness and their maliciousness and their covetousness and their wicked behavior. There's some people who just love evil. And the scripture talks about silly women laden in sins. These type of things, they enter into the homes of these silly women. They like with their ear itching. They like these charismatic things. Narcissists, they love for you to fluff their ego. They love for you to boost their ego. Anything else, the truth to them is like an insult. It's like they're allergic to the truth. How dare you? And then they try to set you up and gaslight you. So I'm going to wrap it up here and continue with part 2. And I just want to say, brothers and sisters, that it's imperative that we continue to press into the spiritual realm and get to know the Most High better. Don't be like your ancestors and continue to look away and pretend that if you continue in ignorance, then you can use that as a crutch. The truth shall set you free. We must worship the Most High in spirit and in truth. Okay, we cannot continue to let the blinds keep over our eyes. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up right here. I hope you all have a blessed rest of your week. Thank you for stopping by, and shalom.